Hi there, my name is Patrick Claudius. In this presentation, I'll be discussing on project entire life cycle. And I'd like you to sit back, relax, and follow me as I share my experience while working on this project. I'm starting from project definition to give an overview of the project that I am working on, that I'm using as a case study for this presentation. Is actually the Supreme Church Cathedral or Supreme Church Worship Center, which is the project I have been assigned to work as the project manager. The requirement of the project is to construct a 10,000 seating auditorium, 10,000 capacity and seating capacity for church members, in addition to having 5 offices and space for the senior pastor and his wife. And then we have 3 other pastors who should have an office individually, and then we have 12 ministers who should have a shared open space as well as other head of department. So there will be 5 offices. Then there will be 2 open space offices for the ministers and the head of department, and then 2 conference rooms for general meetings. So in summary, we have 2 separate. This project is divided into 2 sections. The first section is the main auditorium. The second section is the office space for administrative activities. And so who are the stakeholders in the project? So we have this, the project name is called the Supreme Church, the Supreme Place. And of course, the sponsor, so I said the owner, is the senior pastor of the church, Apostle PRO3200. And the project will be starting on the 1st of February 2023. It will be ending on the 31st of July 2023. So it's to be taking 6 months to complete. The project manager is Daniel Tosin. All right. Moving on. So looking at the primary stakeholders in the project, we have those who are on the internet, the pastors, the ministers, and the project execution team. And then we have the government agencies who supervise the building and ensure that everything conforms with the with specifications, and of course the building have necessary structural integrity. And so looking at the goal of this project, basically the goal is to construct perimeter fencing and flood the entire compound. That's one of the goals. So the goal has been divided into 4 stages to be able to deliver the auditorium that will seat 10,000 capacity. The third goal is to deliver separate administrative offices for the pastors. And the fourth goal is to equip all offices with necessary furnitures. So this is the goal of the project as it is broken down into smaller stages. Right, so what are we delivering? What are the key deliverables of the project? The key factor here is to sort of understand the requirement of the stakeholders. What is their expectations? Discuss the requirement at the initial phase of the project. So this stages has been categorized into initiation, planning, monitoring, and of course execution. And so during the planning, the initiation phase, we discuss requirement, conduct visibility studies on the entire project sites, understand where sockaway, where septic tanks will be sitting, water borehole will be drilled. So this is what will be done at the initial stage, and we're looking at about 2 days to be able to do that. Then the next stage would then be to plan, this involves getting quotations from external suppliers, decide on the 2 best options for materials, some of which include cement, tiles, sand, stones, granites, electrical cables, and several other ones which will be discussed in more details. And to, of course, get at least 2 suitable water sources just in case one source failed. Considering the importance of water inside of the entire project, that one is the best place to store materials within the premises, right? So we want to make sure that from the onset, if we are bringing stones and sand into the venues, that we are able to deliver them into a suitable location that will not be obstructing movement, or will not be delivering sand, pouring sand on places where we want to use as borehole or drill, or for septic tank and all of that, right? So other thing we want to do here under execution will then be to deliver the first set of blocks, which is about 15,000. That will cover the perimeter fencing. Perimeter fencing is the first thing, because that will be providing security for every other building materials that will be delivered on site. And so once the perimeter fencing is constructed, there will be the gate will then be applied, so that provides security for every other activities that will be going on there. And so of course we need to work on cement and sand, water. All of these are some of the crucial factors that would have to be figured out during the execution stage. And finally, on this side, rather, monitoring is another stage, which then includes supervision of the auto designs to ensure that they are in compliance with the specification of the project stakeholders, ensure offices meet up with their designs, ensure that all offices are ensued with toilet and bathroom, everything that is needed in that instant, ensure offices meet up the design, ensure everything conforms to safety standards, and the site workers follow every safety measure. So one of the things that is required that everyone, while they are within the premises, use their helmets. And so the monitoring aspect is to ensure that all of these things are in place. And of course, the end of the project, which is the closing, which would then include looking around to make sure that everything has been done in alignment with what is expected. Furthermore, we're looking at the project schedule, starting from the first phase include fencing, foundation laying, right, and of course bricklaying. And so the fencing, like I said earlier, is to provide security. That's the first step that should be taken. After the entire compound is fenced around, then there will be gates attached, so that there's now security provided, and this would also sort of help in making sure that we're not interfering with the entire members of the community, so that everything is kept within a confined location, which would help us to be able to manage our activities more efficiently. And so once that is done, the next phase is to carry out foundation. The fencing usually will take about 3 days, and after that, the 4th day, we're looking at starting the foundation. And so the foundation will spread for, it takes about 21 days for foundation to dry, right, before you start laying bricks on the foundation. So this period was this particular phase was spanned across 31 days, starting from the day one that the project is kicking off. And so there's a break in the middle, and that's why there's a wide space in that phase 2. Now the phase 2 includes erecting pillars on the foundation to mount the second floor, because the project will be 2-floor, right? And so mounting of pillar frames and concreting of the second floor decking. And so of course, once the pillar frame is erected, they will have to be filled with concrete and all of that, all those iron bar inside the pillar. And then the next phase is to wait for the pillar to dry, right? Say about 7-10 days for that. And then once the pillar is dry, the decking is placed on the pillar. So the decking takes another 21 days again. So that takes an entire for the 31 days to be completed before we roll down to phase 3 of the project, which includes building bricks, laying bricks on the second decking, right? So to now have the second floor, and of course, after the outer frame would then be constructed on the front side, right? So the decking will not cover the pillar side, the outer side from the bottom. So then the plumbing work and electrical work will then kickstart from that particular stage, right? So then from there on, this would then take all of this has been broken down into stages. The bricklaying takes about 1 to 3, takes about 10 days, and then inside of that we then have auto frame that takes about 2 days to be constructed, 3 days rather, and then we now have plumbing and electrical work taking the rest of the remaining days, taking say taking between starting from the 14th day to 22 days, and then electrical work will then take the rest of the days. So the phase 3 is expected to have been completed by the 3rd month. So then we then move down to roofing and roofing, tiling, screening. And so the approach will be that the roofing starts, the carpenter starts their roofing, while tiling work starts from the first floor and the offices. So since the first floor would have been completed by then, tiling starts from there, and the offices would then be going through the tiling phase. The screening is to ensure that the wall is smooth, and that if there is any stain they can easily clean it out. And so all of these and three set of walls will be going on simultaneously. And then the phase 5 is painting and furnishing of the interior, which would include the main building and the offices, right? So the painting of the main auditorium, offices, exterior, and the perimeter fencing, setting up of the office furniture, kitchen cabinets, utensils, and other kitchen equipment. And then once that is done, with the last phase will then be to floor the entire compound, clear flooring of the entire compound, making sure that there's drainage is provided close to the fence, such that when during rainy season there's easy passage for rain to flow out of the church compound. And of course, once that is done, it will then be to clean everything and wash the entire compound, and then of course prep it for inspection by both internal stakeholders, which include the senior pastors, the ministers, and then bring in government agencies who will look at the entire building if it has conformed to every necessary fire safety standard, if all of the structure can actually withstand the 10,000 capacity that the project is intended to take. Moving on to my next slide. So the next phase is resource allocation, and so let's take a look at how the entire project resource will be allocated. And some of the like the resource needed is cement, block, sand, granite. Sand would include granite, gravel, and stones. The tiling, and of course tiles requires that there's a usage of white cement, paint, filler, just in case you have hole in the wall, door locks, wood roofing sheets, ladder to climb, doors, nails, iron rods, and plumbing pipes, gum, zinc, water closet set, office furniture, and the like. So these are the materials that will be needed. And so the phases, and so these materials will be deployed in phases. Of course, so we have both human material and of course other material that is not human being. And so in phase 1, the material that will be needed is to have 10 bricklayers, of course 30 laborers who will support the bricklayers. So the bricklayers will begin their work from the fencing side, while the laborers and then they dive into, so once they dive into decking requires a lot of laborers. That's why we need 30 laborers to speed things up on the decking side. And so of course that will require 300 bags of cement, sand, gravel, water, and blocks, which would be used on the fence. And so moving to phase 2 will also require 30 bricklayers, rather 10 bricklayers, 30 laborers, granite, 200 bags of cement, sand, iron rod, which will be used to strengthen the pillars and to strengthen the deckings. And of course, whether we would be joining the irons together, blocks will be required, water, wood to construct the frame that the decking will be sitting upon. and of course 4 carpenters will be needed at that phase. Uh, Moving to phase 3, there will be 8 bricklayers now, since the work of bricklaying is now reducing. 4 carpenters, 4 plumbers, 4 electricians, 100 bags of cement, wood nails, cable, clips to clip those cable to the right place, sockets, pipes, gum, because this project will be using, um, the pipes will be laid behind the wall, right? And so to phase 4, there'll be need for tiles that will be used on the floor, um, the roof, the zinc that will be laid on the roof, screening paints that will be used on the wall to keep it smooth. Then we're looking at 8 carpenters, because we're now diving deeper into carpenters' work. They'll be the one handling the roof. The 4 screeders will be starting their work from the first floor, moving down to the office. Then the tilers will be spread across both the office and the main auditorium. Of course, water will be needed and throughout all of these phases. Then phase 5 will be to have doors used in the office, locks for those doors, paints, 4 painters, 3 carpenters. They will be, starting their painting work from the offices down to the main auditorium. 1 plumber to what the work would have reduced at this phase, so 1 plumber would just be able to, work on, fixing the rest of the work. Now, this will be the main plumber, just putting the finishing touch on those work, because water closet. Then phase C will include the usage of cement for bricklayers, sandstone cleaners, and of course the pastor. So the work here is to ensure that the compound is now clean. The cement will be used to flood the compound, right, the entire compound. That's what we're using just for bricklayers, right? And so the pastors will be, working around to make sure that inspection have now started here, to make sure that everything has been done in alignment with the project expectation. Project quality management. Essentially, quality is an important aspect of every project, which, if not well managed, may lead to stakeholders' dissatisfaction, and of course would also waste resources. And so basically, the project manager is expected to have a quality management plan in place before even kicking off the project. Generally speaking, project plan is expected to also have a plan to measure risk, plans to measure the quality of the project, with plans on how to make adjustment when the need arises. And so the key components with regards to quality is to ensure that the altar design follows the pattern that the senior pastor has provided. And so the altar design is supposed to have 100 feet in length and 40 feet in wildness, and it must be able to withstand the pressure that will be coming from heavy equipment placed on the altars, which would include drum set, the combo for bass guitar, all of those conga drums, the the monitor speakers, and several other equipment that will be on the altar. So the altar should be able to withstand pressure without collapsing. Another phase is floor tiles. Now, the one key thing about floor tiles is whenever there's a space beneath the tiles, it means that becomes the starting point for the tiles to start breaking. And so it is essential that the tiles are laid without having space beneath, and of course the white cement must be applied in between the tiles to avoid water penetration. Roofing. The key quality check as regards to roofing is to ensure that there's no leakages, right? That it is strongly knit together, and that there's no leakages knit together, so that if during rainy season, when wind start blowing, the roof does not give space, that it must be strong. With regards to decking and pillars, the key quality check here is that it must have the capacity to carry the weight of the 4,000 worshippers, right? So you have 6,000 worshippers sitting on the first floor. The second floor will be housing 4,000 worshippers, and so it must have the weight. The decking must have the weight to be able to withstand that kind of pressure. The right proportion of cement must be used. Sand, gravel, and iron with water test must be conducted before it is used. Essentially, in building construction, other test is necessary to test the acidity of the water, because this would have impact on on concrete, or on concrete when it's being mixed with water. It may impact the quality of the concrete and the ability to dry faster. Lastly, with regards to painting and electrical works, this is something that is crucial, especially electricity, because this, of course, will pose huge fire hazard if not carefully, if it doesn't meet necessary safety standard. And so, cable must be well laid, sockets and junction boxes tested for positive and negative charges. Fire hazard prevention, paint must be properly mixed to achieve the desired color. The senior pastor is someone who is very mindful of, who pays attention to details, right? So once he has a specific expectation in mind, and of course, so all of these expectations must be met. And so if the colors are not mixed together properly, it will not yield desired result in that instance. The next one is risk management plan, where risk is inevitable in every project. Essentially, having a risk management plan in place right from the beginning of the project will provide a defense against failure. Risk management plans helps to mitigate against negative circumstances through creating of the right strategies in place, and that will serve as a guide, during decision making. And so the risk plans help to help guides when making decisions. And of course, in the case of this project, Mr. Tunde has been assigned as the risk owner, right? So, which is one of the key factor in project. Mr. Tunde has been assigned as the risk owner, and his primary responsibility is to create a risk register, right? So, is also each identified risk in the project will be classified and given the priority between high and low, so as to manage the kind of attention that would be given or devoted to such risk. And so the following describes some of those things. And so with regards to perimeter fencing, or with regards to risk identification stage, so we want to identify the risk of the perimeter fencing collapsing in the course of my construction, right? So if the fencing does not have adequate meter in place, considering the length of the fence, is bound to collapse, uh, even during the period of construction. So there must be, pillars in place, pillars erected in the right place, and this pillar must be filled up with concrete, right? So this must be this is a risk that is um, rated high, because if the fence collapses, it poses another security threat to whatever has been kept in the compound, right? So of course, to have, we must also avoid having too many broken blocks, which would of course impact the project budgets. So this must be avoided. Of course, this has been ranked as a low risk mixture of two brands of cement. And so, for example, the two of the major cements in Nigeria is the Dangote cement and Lafarge cement. However, Dangote cement is regarded to dry faster when compared to Lafarge cement, but Lafarge cement, on the other hand, lasts longer, is stronger than Dangote cement, even though it doesn't dry as fast as Dangote cement, right? So if these two cement are mixed together, and so it can in fact impact the strength or the integrity of the project. So when it is assumed that the what has been done has dried and is ready for further construction, it may not be, right? And so it makes it difficult to even calculate project timeline. So this must be avoided, right? Unavailable water, right? So one of the important resource needed for this project is water. And so since borehole may not have been prepared from project onset, right? So water source must be well secured before the project starts. So having at least two water sources, such that if one is not available, we can leverage on the second one, and it should be put in place, and this has been rated very high, as it will, as it, of course, as it does have the capacity to store progress. Water impacting concrete works, if of course if proper test is not conducted, and if proper test is not conducted on the water, it means it will affect the concrete. Of course, quality checks on iron rods. So basically, the iron rods are usually of 2 or 3 different types depending on the quality. So it's essential that we pay attention to this to make sure that we're using the right quality for the right place. And of course, this quality may not even be on account of the price. It could be in terms of the diameter. So if you're using if it is going to be used for decking or pillar, we're gonna have to use the right iron rod. Wrong laying of tiles is another risk that would affect budget, because if it is wrongly laid, it would have to break it, and of course breaking it means that would have to replace them, which would then have impact on the budgets. Another part is lack of funding, right? So it's a church project, which means that the money may not readily be available. Since it's a 6 months project, right? So church would rely on offering that comes in every Sunday, and so if care is not taken, if what is expected doesn't come in, it means that progress will be stalled. And of course, workers, that especially the laborers, since we are not fully engaging them, we are only bringing them on board on need-to basis, right? So it means that if they are not pre-informed, they would have taken another job before time, and so they must be pre-informed, otherwise they will slow us down and of course impact the timeline and the cost. And so basically what the risk, in terms of risk analysis, the risk has been divided into financial and time setback, which would of course affect the budgets and the timeline. So the response planning is to of course have a backup plan to anticipate the issues, to break and rebuild where necessary, especially in the case of tiling. With regards to risk mitigation, the crucial point is to always communicate, to provide necessary supervision, and to engage with the stakeholders. Now, this, in terms of response planning for the risk, and so with regards to perimeter fencing, what is needed there is to ensure adequate pillars are erected, as I said earlier, to make sure that we have adequate laborers in place. In terms of mixture of 2 brands, use it in areas where it will have less impact. For example, flooring, that may not have, mixing the 2 brands may not have so much impact on the flooring, especially if you're starting from the first floor, right? With regards to availability of water, it's good to discuss with neighbors to make sure that we can switch to using their option when one option runs out. And of course, this would also include we having a hose from the onset, having row hose, hose that we can use to connect water from their end, and then having water storage tank in place from the onset. Now, this will not impact budget because the water storage tank can then be used when the project is completed as a site as for water storage in the building. And so use such concrete for flooring in the case of when the concrete has been impacted by the quality of water. Quality checks on iron rod, we can break it. All we need to do is to break it down, because if building control agency from government should come on board and realize that the quality of iron used does not meet standard, they will have to break it down, and so we're better, and they will penalize us for doing that. And so we're better off to break it down when we notice, whenever it is detected from our end, than to wait for. We may assume they will not see it and they will see it, and then they will punish us for a laxity. And so wrong laying of tiles would also have to be broken down and replaced immediately. Otherwise, water will start penetrating the deckings when the tiles start breaking. Roof leakages, these must be detected. This has to be replaced and fixed immediately. Otherwise, water will start sinking into the building. lack of funding. So what can be done is for the church to speak with their bankers, because since the church is always bank is always depositing fund into the bank on a regular basis, they can get a certain amount. They can get the fund that will be needed for the project. At least certain, say 50-25% of this fund, the bank can be given, can provide security for the church, while the church will keep remitting as time goes on. Risk mitigation. And so the crucial thing when it comes to communication is to adequately inform every stakeholders of their role, their aspect where risk and the effect will have and the effect it will have on the project. This must be well communicated. On the aspect of supervision, now supervision is just a way of being able to even detect some of these risks in the first place. Ensure multiple layers of supervisions are put in place. Every team should be headed by an individual who understands the risk in their own part of the project. And so, for instance, if um, the electrical team, right, is headed by an individual who understands that if anything goes wrong on the part of electricity, this can cause fires that which can result into loss of life. And so they understand the nature of the risk that is attached to that end, and they are able to provide guidance to the entire team on how to mitigate against such risk. Strategic thinking, which is, of course, the ability to think ahead throughout the project development phases to be able to prioritize tasks, especially those tasks that goes together. This will help to manage resources even when they are becoming excess, right? So, for instance, if flooring of the main auditorium is going side by side with flooring of the offices, when if there is excess um, materials or excess mixed cement and sand for the main auditorium, these can be diverted to the offices. So the strategic thinking would help to identify tasks that can flow together. And of course, in terms of continuous engagement with stakeholders, it is important to review work done at the end of every day, possibly, so as to quickly detect areas of defect, and of course to be able to discuss with the teams on how to fix it. If it's something that can be fixed immediately, if it's something that they will devote one member of the team to fix it the next day, while others carry out their other tasks without impacting the project timeline. In terms of risk monitoring, of course, the necessary thing is to conduct um, reassessment. This is to check after the risk has been amended. And so once a risk is spotted in the course of project execution, um, and the risk is now amended, the next thing is to reassess it if it has now conformed with what with the expectation, then to also get feedback from the stakeholders. And so sometimes it could be that the risk were actually spotted by the stakeholders, of course. And so once that risk is took, for example, if say someone jump in and say, well, the tiles needed to be replaced. When the tiles are replaced and fixed, we also need to confirm if it is now if it is now in alignment with expectations. So all of these, there must be constant feedback from the stakeholders to say, oh, this part has been fixed. Can you have a look at it to be sure it has been done as expected? Then, of course, there must be budget analysis. Budget analysis is to be able to spot if all of those risks, if it's now to be able to determine the impact the the adjustment that is being made is having on the overall budget. If pillars are being destroyed, certain areas are being broken, it means that cement will be impacted, more will be used. And so it is essential that the budget is evaluated to understand areas where we have deviated away from, ensure that financial adjustment can be made quickly before um, we get to that point. And of course, this would also help to guide in terms of spending. Stakeholders management plan, which is another crucial aspect to look at. So the project communication plan describes the interval at which information is to be shared among project stakeholders. The communication plan basically provides a means for every team member to know exactly who is in charge of any aspect of the project. It set the time for meetings, when everyone can expect to receive updates, when they can move on to the next task, when they can get response to say, okay, this particular aspect has been completed in alignment with project expectation and all of that. So the key thing to note here is to understand the key information, so starting from the core aspects to take note of in every task delivery. So every team would have to understand the areas where they need to be mindful of, to understand the project manager will need to communicate with the team head to understand this is the areas that is very important that you need to pay attention to. And of course, in the case of fencing, the pillars in between the fence is a very important aspect to take note of. Then important title or pronoun of the project stakeholders. So for instance, we have the senior pastor is the general overseer of the church. We have the ministers. You don't want to address someone who is just a minister as a senior pastor. So all of these we have to take note of the set of proper way of addressing each of the stakeholders. Another crucial aspect is to to know the kind of progress update, to update on what has been done and where adjustment is required. This has to be communicated. Event schedule. So this would enable us to be able to know, to be able to communicate when the next meeting will be taking place. Who are those who should be in that meeting? Would there be? Are we going to be having special visitation from external agencies, from government, building inspection unit? All of these has to be communicated and put in place. Then task review, who will review the task in each team before it can be considered completed. And when it is not completed, if there's any negative feedback, who is handling it? At what point do we determine if it has been worked upon? And of course, contact logbook. This is where we have the contact of every stakeholder so that we're able to provide engagement so that if anyone needs to quickly get information or approval from anybody, they know exactly where to find the contact of such an individual and they can reach out when it is required. All of those labels, we have their contact and we know when exactly to call them ahead of time, right? So all of these are something very important, right? Then we have continuity of the project, the stakeholders management plan. Of course, in terms of the stakeholder, these are some of the crucial stakeholders listed. The senior pastor is Apostle, his wife, special advisor, Pastor Precious is an advisor. We have Pastor Dario, who is an admin. We have Pastor Samuel, assistant pastor. We have Mr. Fumi, who heads compliance for the church. And so their interest in the project is ranked between high and low. Of course, the apostles requires timely updates on project progress. That's his expectations, and he gives, of course, approval, budget. If there's any changes, he has to be informed. He has to be carried along. And so, method of reaching out to him would include phone, message, of course, meeting. In terms of his wife, he has to be kept informed. He suggests areas of improvement and provide feedback. However, he cannot give approval. This would have to be communicated to the PM and then to the senior pastor, who will have to approve whatever comes out of that. And so, keeping informed is during general meetings. Then you have the Pastor Precious, who stays in that same line, keep informed. She can suggest, and of course, approval will still have to go to the main, the PM and the senior pastor. We have Pastor Dari, who is the admin, who would always have to be given timely updates on progress. And then he is responsible for liaising with senior pastors. He can give approval after receiving it from senior pastor. And so he's somebody who is important, who has to be kept informed, using telephone, message, and during meeting. Then we also have Pastor Samuel, who is under the same category, can get approval from the senior pastor just in case the senior pastor is unavailable. These are also very important touch point. Then we have the head of compliance, the same category. She must be kept informed, and approval she can get from the senior pastor as well. Excuse me. Communication and reporting plans. And so these are the stakeholders involved in this project. Now looking at the bricklayer head, the carpenter head, the electrician, plumbers, painters, graders, down to interior designer. And so in terms of their task, you have to provide updates on every stage is completed based on the schedule. Updates every stage is completed based on the schedule. They have similar tasks. In terms of frequency, the bricklayer is expected to carry out that update on a daily and weekly basis. You have the carpenter head expected to, because his work is dependent on the bricklayer, so his own updates is weekly. Same with electrician, same with plumber, painters update is bi-weekly, screeders bi-weekly. Also design daily is expected to send screenshot of what has been done to the senior pastor. The plumber is also expected to send snapshot of areas worked upon to, sorry, not to the senior pastor, to Mr. Shegun, who heads that aspect of the project. In terms of their priority, all of these has been covered as well. Screeders, who is who also have to provide update to Mr. Sunday, is actually the priority is quite low, because the screening work is something that one can easily see, and if it has not been properly done, it's something that is usually obvious, right? And so method of communicating with the person in charge is through phone call or slash meeting, right? So this can be done during weekly meetings, weekly review meetings. And so in terms of the altar design, the person in charge is Ms. Fumi, who has to provide update to the senior pastor in that instant. Then the entire interior design, the update has to go to the PM, and then has to go to the apostle himself. This is of high priority, and the major possible means of communication is phone, WhatsApp. The phone call and WhatsApp when sending screenshot to him, right? So these are some of the important communication and reporting plans to take note of, right? In conclusion, project management is indeed an interesting subject, and I must acknowledge that I have gained tremendous knowledge through this exercise. I've improved, I've learned a lot of things. Both I've learned on how I can apply project management skills to software development project, which is one of the tasks I earlier worked on in my previous module. I've also learned how I can function as a project manager for construction project. And so my key takeaways are the knowledge gains on the importance of adequate planning before the project kickoff, some of which would include, having risk management in place, resource allocation, communication channels, quality plans, and among several other key things to take note of from the onset. Most importantly, I've learned how to rescue a failing project, as well as minimizing the possibility of failure in a project. And so if a project is failing, I've learned on how I can rescue it, and to also reduce the risk of having a failed project. Finally, I am super proud of the knowledge I've gained through this course, and I have started seeing the impact in my career so far. And it's been a great privilege to learn through this course. With regards to references used in this project, right, so these are some of the references conducted. I use AIPM to sort of have deeper understanding of risk management in project management. Then I also use outreach, which to help how to monitor risk, stakeholders management planning guides. Then I also use wider to sort of get more information with regards to project communication. I hope you have enjoyed the session and presentation with me. Thank you so much for your time.